Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is having one of the most impactful first months in office of any new member of Congress in a long time. You can tell from reports tonight some Democrats are threatening her now with a primary challenge, and from how two billionaires with decades of experience in public life are name-checking her proposal to tax people who make over $10 million and similar proposals.
I don't think we want a 70% income tax in America.
It's called Venezuela.
Michael Bloomberg served as a Republican. Now he says he's thinking about running against Trump as a Democrat, while former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz saying he may run as an independent, and he's blasting Elizabeth Warren's similar tax plan as ridiculous. Another senator running for president, though, sounding closer to the Warren position at her town hall last night.
Part of it is that people at the top 1%, people who are making $10 million a year, who have $50 million a year, they need to pay more taxes.
And as for that billionaire, Howard Schultz, he's hearing it from protesters.
Don't help elect Trump, you egotistical billionaire asshole. How dare is a human right? How dare is a human right?
Let's get into one of the Democratic Party's biggest battles with views from across the spectrum. A man who literally represents Wall Street, attorney Richard Farley, author of Wall Street Wars, the epic battles that Washington created the modern financial system. And Mark Thompson, a former activist and political organizer who hosts Make It Plain on Sirius XM Radio. He's broadcast from every Democratic convention since 1992. Mark, I begin with you. A lot of fire on the left for moving beyond the Trump discussion and trying to fix all of this wealth at the top and a lack of perceived accountability for Wall Street.
And picking up from where 2016 left off, we have to honestly give Bernie Sanders credit, because in his campaign, he began to move the discussion in this direction. Now Elizabeth Warren's picking it up, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and obviously Kamala Harris on last night. And I think that what Howard Schultz and Michael Bloomberg, but particularly Howard Schultz, is doing, I don't think he's helping his case. This is where the Democratic Party is right now. This is where the base is. This is where the party is most progressive. And I think people are ready to embrace. They want to see a change. Wages are not what they ought to be. People are not doing well who are in the middle class. In fact, the middle class has become not only the working class, but in many respects the working poor. So this is going to, I think, dominate the campaign over the next year.
Richard?
If it dominates the campaign, if taxes dominates the campaign, we lose the election as Democrats. He who or she who has the most creative ways to tax the voters is not going to be the next president of the United States. Now, you have to bifurcate the issue between going after Wall Street, which is very popular, in large part because people think that the system was unfair and they gain their wealth unfairly. I don't think the Democratic primary voter, not to mention the general election voter, is most concerned about making sure that rich people per se pay more taxes. I think they want more opportunities for themselves, and they want to know that the system is not rigged against them.
So let me push you on that and then get Mark's rebuttal. as a policy matter, everyone could debate the right tax rate.
Sure.
When you say, oh, we can't do that kind of language, we'll put the marginal rate up on the screen.
Sure.
There was a period of time, as you know, where America and politicians got elected during that period too had a much higher rate, and it has gone down
Except
in the view of these activists because of progressive reforms.
You had a headline rate
that then were wiped out by Wall Street reform.
You had a headline rate in the 90s at one point in time, except nobody paid it because you had a vibrant industry of tax shelters and ways to make sure that rich people didn't pay the highest marginal rate. So if you look at the amount of income that was actually taxed at those rates, it was nominal.
Mark?
But it was still on the books. But I would say, to Richard's point, Richard, I think it's a both and not an either or. Because the debate since 2016 has been about the top 1% of earners. And it's also been about Wall Street itself. And quite frankly, it's also been about people wanting to have an opportunity. So I don't think this is the beginning and the end of the debate. I think this is just one part of it. The tax part is a part of it. And, you know, it gets somewhat complicated, not very sexy. But when you get into the issue of Wall Street, when you get into people having other opportunities, let me also mention Howard Schultz took on 3 women today. I mean, that's unprecedented unto itself. And the other reason that's important, not just because they're women, but because what do we know about women today? I think we're at a point where over 50% of the major breadwinners in households or the heads of households are women.
But he would argue he's taken on their ideas. Richard?
I'm not sure this is a gender issue. I think.
No, I want to be clear. I'm not saying I'm not saying he's making. What I'm saying is, these are women running for office, appealing to an issue that women are concerned about. Right. Women represent that
hits a lot of households.
They're struggling. That's all I'm saying.
I think the concern is less about. Again, I think there's been a conflation between the 1% and tax policy, and whether or not those at the 1% got there fairly or not.
Yeah, but you're doing analysis. What about this? Because this is what Elizabeth Warren's running on. I'm going to put up the Oxfam numbers that are just wild. You have basically 26 people, super duper billionaires, and they have as much wealth as half the world.
Yeah.
Is it good for Democrats to run, or any party to run and say, maybe we want to fix that a little bit?
Yeah, and I think absolutely. But I think the way you fix that is you show how you're going to get more wage growth and opportunities for people who are not earning what they should have been earning if the increase in wealth over the past generation had been distributed fairly, as it had been in the 30 years after World War II.
Well, final thought. We're out of time. Mark, your thoughts about what we've heard from this Wall Street lawyer Democrat?
Well, again, I would just again say it's all of the above. The argument that you're making
if
about
I
how
were
they got
advising
their wealth.
Elizabeth Warren, it's a crowded field. You have a limited amount of oxygen. I would not be using up my oxygen talking about taxes.
And we got practically 2 years. We're almost 2 years, so we got plenty of time.
So we'll revisit it. Right now, we are out of oxygen. Richard Farley, Mark Thompson, thank you both.
It is Wednesday, the 30th of January of 2019. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. And our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. It's truly just a lovely egg dish with a velvety hollandaise sauce. It's not what you're thinking. Well, actually it is too, because in this realm of existence, there are many levels of meaning. Speaking of levels of meaning, I want to speak a little bit about that Wall Street lawyer, speaking with Ari at the top. My God. Yeah, he's going to advise the Democrats that, you better not be talking about taxes. No one's going to vote anything about taxes. It's not about the taxes. It's about the economy, stupid. It's not about taxes. It's really about the money. All right? The billionaires with their marginal tax rate scam are being threatened by Ocasio-Cortez and the team. That's right. The GOP has the family, and we have the team. All right. Well, I'm glad that they're getting upset, because they need to be exposed, and we need to put to bed this attitude here in America that we can't allow a tax on any dollar above $10 million, because Many Americans think that at some day in the near future, or the distant, but it will happen, they will become a billionaire themselves. And they want to be dickheads and dick everybody around the world like billionaires are doing now. There's some sort of psychotic need to step on the throats of people because people have been stepping on your throat. I would say that is not American. But there's many Americans who do it, and they're holding up the works because of this crazy idea. Look, if you want to go back to the 50s, you're going to have to, get used to, in some cases, a 90% marginal tax. Okay? And America was working just fine, and everybody loved it. People got elected. Yeah. So I think maybe taxes on the very rich who are not paying their taxes. Oh, yeah, I know they always say they are, but they're not. And I also know from personal experience, the more money someone has, the less they tip. Billionaires are the worst. They are the absolute worst in tipping. They don't tip. Jeez. And it's really hard. You try, when you're in that industry, at least I always did, you try not to stereotype the customer, the guest, by how you think they will tip. Oh, I know many waiters and bartenders do. They'll say, I'm not serving that English couple because English people only tip 5%. Canadians too. And it gets worse from there. I'll tell you. So I don't really want to condemn all 2,000 of the billionaires because they really do act all the same. And they're lousy tippers. Which goes to the point that in terms of philanthropy, Schultz, it's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent that he's put out to philanthropy. Part of that higher marginal tax was when you got over, we'll just say 10 million. Every dollar after that at 70% is what's being proposed now. What happened back in the day is that the money manager of that person who was making 10 million plus said, well, we better find some charities to spend this money on. And then you get to keep the other 30%. How do you like that? And it's supposed to open up a person's heart. It's supposed to instill noblesse oblige. Noblesse oblige is not rising to a level where you can lord over everybody. That's, Schultz, that is not noblesse oblige. And I got to tell you, the Starbucks business model has all sorts of inclusiveness and social issues. That's what you hear. Talk to Starbucks employees and tell me what, and then let them tell you how they think about the way Starbucks works. And I have another issue with Starbucks because their business model was to put a Starbucks on every effing corner. God, right there at the gate into Chinatown in San Francisco. They were trying to kick out De La Presse and make a Starbucks there, and there's already a Starbucks across the street. I'm serious. In parts of San Francisco, there was a Starbucks on every corner. So, as far as I'm concerned, Starbucks was part of the destruction of America, and part of that destruction of America was getting rid of small business. Oh, they always revel and expound about how they are advocates and fighters for small business. They could give an F about small business. They want to take over everything. Okay? GOP, the family. Democrats, the team. All right, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fair Wednesday, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays? The Iowa House's decision to deny press credentials to influential political blogger Laura Belin is a disturbing limitation on her First Amendment rights. And I might say it would be a limitation and an attack on our First Amendment rights, because we're supposed to depend upon the press to give us the news from inside the halls of government. Okay, well, they don't like her liberal politics and leanings, which is exactly what the First Amendment was supposed to protect against. Trump's new Stephen Miller immigration policy, and I got the trademark on that one. Trump's new Stephen Miller immigration policy makes it virtually impossible to claim asylum in the United States. Stephen Miller says he would be happy if not one refugee sets foot in the United States. Racist Nazi. And the anti-vaccination movement has fueled a deadly measles outbreak in Washington state, to the point that Inslee has declared a state emergency. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where Tax Committee Chair Richard Neal is seeking details of the Treasury Department's debt limit plans. Oh yeah, that's an issue already floated by the White House as part of the debate over Trump's border wall. Who gave him that idea, Lindsey Graham? And Russia leaked information about another secret U.S. meeting with Putin to remind Trump that Vlad has saved all the receipts from their interactions, and he is not afraid to use them. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Yes, I did decide to go back with the original lineup of Frances Living's music that she provided us with, that I use as what we call interstitials. And there's just something uplifting with the lineup that I have been using. And so I guess I will continue to do so. If you go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln very diligently, I might add, because she's got a real life and has to pay the bills. And this is a volunteer effort, and in some cases the money comes out of our pocket. That's why I'm going to make a little plea like I do every show. All right. Thank you, Kelly, for taking care of the chat room and other things too. If you then go to or look to the leftish of the from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the contribute button, and please do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Don't buy your coffee at Starbucks. Friends don't let friends go to Starbucks. I've been saying this since really the early to mid 80s. Starbucks started in 71. Did you know that? Yeah. But I've been complaining about their business model of, coffee shop on every corner with their name on it. What's up with that? So instead of buying a venti latte, a recurring contribution to Netroots Radio goes a long way, because that really puts a big dent in our ability to pay our bills. And we are truly unable to do this without you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do that. You can find us at Netroots Radio. Tom monitors and takes care of that platform, and we are forever grateful for Tom for doing that. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I take care of that. No one else should or would. Well, maybe they would. if I asked. But yeah, follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and I can be found there as Justice Putnam. The show is on Twitter at Cookbook West, and podcasts of the show can be found at Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, YouTube, iHeart, iTunes, and God, there's a slew of others too, so check it out. All right. Let's take a look at this first article here, because this comes out of PEN America. And this is happening in state houses and other, has been happening in city councils and whatnot for quite a while, in county meetings. But state houses have been taking up the slack lately, and that is denying press credentials to what they call the qualified press. Getting a press credential, I can understand, but, there seems to be a poll tax almost in who is allowed in and out and able to report. So this is from PEN America, and it is a disturbing limitation on Laura Belin's First Amendment rights, but I would also add that it is denying our First Amendment rights because we do rely upon the press to give us information, and this journalist is denied that. Well, she's covered political news in the Iowa State Legislature since 2007 and recently applied for and was denied a formal press credential that would have allowed her to cover the 2019 legislative session. The press credential would have provided deeper access to lawmaker briefings throughout the session, as well as a workspace to focus on her blog, The Bleeding Heartland, which receives more than 1,500 unique daily visitors when the legislature is in session. Belin has been touted as one of the best political reporters in Iowa by news executive Michael Gartner. In denying Belin's application, her Iowa House, the Iowa House, stated that press credentials are not issued to members of the public. Oh, so now you're saying she's not a writer, even though she's been quantified as one of the best writers in Iowa. The Associated Press and other non-traditional news outlets have been issued new press credentials in the past and suggested that the reason for the denial may be the liberal-leaning nature of her blog. And Belin has attempted to appeal the House's decision and is considering legal action. There is little obvious reason why the Iowa House might have denied Belin's press credential application, and it would be deeply concerning if their decision was motivated by wanting to restrict the political viewpoints espoused in her blog, said Nora Benavides, director of U.S. Free Expression programs at PEN America. The general lack of transparency around the House's process for approving press credentials creates a space for unfounded restrictions of journalist access. We caution the Iowa House that any content-based limitations on journalists and their ability to report on government business would be an affront to press freedoms. Now, in October of 2018, PEN America filed a lawsuit, PEN American v. Trump, that seeks to stop Trump from using the machinery of government to retaliate or threaten reprisals against journalists and media outlets for coverage he dislikes. The only entity that can violate the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and freedom of the press is the government. And I got to tell you, this mobster right now is the government. David Morgan of Reuters brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. A leading Democrat in Congress asked the U.S. Treasury yesterday to advise lawmakers about when it intends to seek an increase in the U.S. debt ceiling, an issue that could become part of the debate over Donald Trump's border wall. Well, yeah, they've already floated that idea. Who gave it to them, Lindsey Graham? Who gave it to them? Representative Richard Neal, who chairs the Tax Committee in the House of Representatives, requested details about Trump administration's debt limit plans in a January 29th letter to Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. I want to know, what was the commission Mnuchin received for dropping the sanction against Deripaska and other Russian oligarchs? I'm just wondering. You know, he was on the yacht, Blavinek's yacht. Yeah. Was that when he got the commission? I'm just wondering. But back to this story. The current limit on U.S. debt extends through March 1st, and that's coming up. And analysts say Congress will likely have to reinstate the ceiling at a level well above $20 trillion, or risk a first-ever default that would damage U.S. credit. Now, who would benefit from that? Maybe a supposed world power with the economy on par with Italy? Trump is going to parlay this as some sort of sick negotiating tactic. Nice economy there, you gotta. Hate if something happened to it that made it get broken, like before. You know, we're still suffering and will suffer economically for a considerable time because of that peak. Congress and Trump reopened the government last week with a measure that will expire on the 15th of February. Oh, yeah. Everybody wakes up on the morning after Valentine's Day, don't they? What have I done? Republican Senator Lindsey Graham has urged Trump to consider the possibility of making the debt limit part of ongoing negotiations over border security. Now, of course, the idea was quickly rejected by Democrats who have accused Trump of using federal workers furloughed by the shutdown as hostages in his bid to win congressional approval for his border wall. In his letter, Neal blamed Trump's 2017 tax cuts for a significant drop in government revenue and warned that effects of another shutdown could cut revenue even more. Which I would respond with, yeah, that's exactly what they want. Look, we're the United States. Putin has the economy of Italy. Have you noticed the price of United States aluminum has tanked since the sanctions on Deripaska have been lifted? I wonder what Mnuchin's commission is on that. Go a little over into our break, but that's okay. We're a salon, and you're here to enjoy and not be rushed. Okay. Elam Katami of Think Progress brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A measles outbreak in Washington state led Governor Jay Inslee to declare a state of emergency, and health officials reported on Monday that the number of cases has increased from 26 to 36 in addition to 11 suspected cases across 2 counties. According to the Washington Department of Health, at least 31 of the cases involve people who had not been vaccinated for measles, a troubling sign of the growing influence of the anti-vaccination movement that has spread rapidly in the Pacific Northwest. Most of the cases have been reported in Clark County, which borders Oregon. Of the overall number of people diagnosed in Washington, 25 are under the age of 10, 9 are between the ages of 11 and 18, 1 is between the ages of 19 and 29, and 1 in his 50s. Children under 12 months are not eligible for vaccination. Now, if these were brown kids at the southern border, you know they'd be put in icebox baby gulags. You just know that. And these other kids there, I don't know, bringing pestilence and disease into our country? Oh, wait a second, they're already here. We are close to the so-called herd immunity threshold. Dr. Seb B. Omer, a professor of global health at Emory University, said, referring to the percentage of people in a population who are immune to a disease and thus can reduce the risk of transmission, for measles, the threshold is 92%. I don't want to be alarmist, Omar told Think Progress. We have robust immunization programs, and the CDC has a very proactive program to counter these outbreaks. Now, the anti-vaccination movement is based on junk science, which incorrectly draws a connection between vaccines and the increasing risk of autism in children. Maybe it could be something else. How about high fructose corn syrup in your Wheaties, or your Fruit Loops, or your Haagen-Dazs, or your cranberry cocktail mix, or your. I don't know. Seems to me like you'd get a tick. Our population not being vaccinated against diseases that decimated populations. A hostile foreign power, possibly, who wants property delivered vacant because it's always more valuable that way. Inquiring minds want to know, but for the immediate problem at hand, maybe some stricter measures need to be applied to make certain that the whole of a community is not endangered by the irresponsible opinions of a few. All right, I'm off my soapbox. Let's get to our break. And when we get back from our break, you know we're going to go through weather from around the world. And if you think the polar vortex is only here in America, hey, a butterfly wing beating here will create a hurricane way over there. All right, and then we'll finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Ground Glass. Back in 2000, before Marvel Studios existed, before Sam Raimi rocked the radioactive spider bite, 3 years after Joel Schumacher tried to kill the Batman franchise and bury it in concrete, and just a few months after the world had been introduced to Patrick Stewart in a wheelchair and Hugh Jackman in claws, writer, producer, director M. Night Shyamalan sneaked Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson in a smart, grounded superhero movie right under our noses with Unbreakable. And then he moved on. Shyamalan says he's not one for sequels. He's dubious about the ability to recreate or recapture a feeling. So it was a surprise when 16 years later, his serial killer thriller Split with James McAvoy and Anna Taylor-Joy revealed itself to have been set in the Unbreakable universe. Now Shyamalan brings his 3 stars together to complete the trilogy that we never thought to hope for in Glass. To call Glass a superhero movie is to give you unfair expectations. There are no capes, no tights, no terabytes of CGI. Yes, there are people with powers, but they exist in a grounded world that is sure of the possibility that such powers can exist. In fact, the problem of believing in these powers sits at the crux of the movie, a movie that feels so confident. Shyamalan is ready to go on Glass. He knows these characters, he knows the story he wants to tell, and he does not wait for you. If you haven't seen Unbreakable and Split, then you'll still pick up who's who and what's at stake, but you'll feel like you just joined the book in Chapter 10. Willis and Jackson do what they do, but it's really McAvoy as Kevin Wendell Crumb and his dozen or so different personalities that steal the show. It is sick to see McAvoy work his acting chops. His characterizations are so great, which makes sense because he's already had a whole movie to build them. As much as Shyamalan likes to keep moving forward, trying new genres, telling new stories, maybe there's something to be said for taking a moment to stand on familiar ground. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
Hi, I'm Scientific American podcast editor Steve Mirsky, and here's a short piece from the January 2019 issue of the magazine in the section called Advances, Dispatches from the Frontiers of Science, Technology, and Medicine. The article is titled Quick Hits, and it's a rundown of some science and technology stories from around the globe, compiled by editorial contributor Emiliano Rodriguez-Mega. From Italy, Europe's most relentless volcano, Mount Etna, is slowly sliding into the sea under its own weight. If part of it collapses suddenly, researchers say it could trigger mega tsunamis in the Mediterranean. From Indonesia, the construction of a hydroelectric dam and power plant in North Sumatra's Batang Toru forest caused orangutans from an endangered, newly described species to flee the project site. The government has sent guards to monitor the apes, which have built their nests on local plantations. From the Netherlands, a court of appeals in The Hague has ruled that the Dutch government needs to take action to help stop climate change. The ruling states that the country must reduce greenhouse gas emissions to at least 25% below 1990 levels by 2020. From Kazakhstan, an astronaut and a cosmonaut escaped a Russian spacecraft that experienced a launch failure shortly after takeoff. Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin landed safely after their capsule made an emergency separation from the rocket. From Papua New Guinea, health authorities detected the first polio outbreak in Papua in 18 years. The 3 cases were identified in Morobe province, where sanitation is limited and vaccine coverage is low. And from Bulgaria, the world's oldest intact shipwreck was discovered at the bottom of the Black Sea off the coast. Radiocarbon analysis suggests the wood vessel dates back to 400 BC. That was Quick Hits by Emiliano Rodriguez-Mega.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
It's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
The most senior officials in the Trump administration testified Tuesday before a Senate hearing about the most urgent global threats facing the U.S., suggested that many of the president's sweeping assertions related to national security are inconsistent with their own assessments. CNN put together a handy fantasy versus reality clip.
We have won against ISIS. We've beaten them, and we've beaten them badly.
ISIS is intent on resurging and still commands thousands of fighters in Iraq and Syria.
Chairman Kim, we have a great chemistry, and we're well on our way. You know, we signed an agreement. It said we will begin the immediate denuclearization.
North Korea will seek to retain its WMD capabilities and is unlikely to completely give up its nuclear weapons and production capabilities.
I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be.
Not only have the Russians continued to do it in 2018, but we've seen indication that they're continuing to adapt their model.
Fox News actual newsman Shepard Smith explains what happened.
Our reporting begins with President Trump's intelligence team contradicting what the president himself has told the American people and the very foundation of his foreign policy. The director of national intelligence, Dan Coates, telling senators on the Intelligence Committee that China and Russia are the biggest threats to the United States, and that officials in Beijing and in Moscow are more aligned than they have been in decades. The FBI Director Chris Wray told members of the committee that Russia is likely to once again use social media in an attempt to sway the 2020 presidential election.
Is it the IC's assessment that this country's adversaries continue to use U.S. social media platforms as a vehicle for weaponizing disinformation and spreading foreign influence in the United States?
Yes, that's certainly the FBI's assessment. Not only have the Russians continued to do it in 2018, but we've seen indication that they're continuing to adapt their model and that other countries are taking a very interested eye in that approach.
Of course, intelligence agencies found Russia did meddle in the 2016 presidential election and in the 2018 midterms, using social media, among other things, to try to manipulate voters. Here's where some of the testimony from Coates, FBI Director Christopher Wray, and the CIA Director Gina Haspel directly contradicts President Trump and his foreign policy. First, the intelligence chief testified that North Korea will likely not give up its nuclear arsenal. In fact, Director Coates testified its leaders ultimately view nuclear weapons as critical to the North Korean regime's survival. Second, on Iran, the Islamic Republic is not currently undertaking the key nuclear weapons development activity necessary to make a bomb. And third, regarding the ongoing threat from the Islamic State, ISIS still commands thousands of fighters in Iraq and Syria and is active in Syria and has networks around the world. In short, ISIS is not defeated. And finally, nowhere in the 42-page threat assessment report is there an indication that a wall on our southern border would be helpful in any way, and nothing to indicate that a wall should be built to bolster national security or anything else.
Trump started off his Wednesday with a tweet storm contradicting those truths. #sad. Speaking of problems with U.S. foreign policy, here's one that should make you good and angry. Remember back in November when the Trump administration announced that a planned sit-down between Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin at the G20 in Argentina was canceled following Russia's attack on 3 Ukrainian naval vessels in the Azov Sea? Well, shocker alert, they lied. Financial Times is reporting that Trump did indeed sit down with Putin at the G20 in Buenos Aires. He did it with no translator or note taker from the U.S. side to record the dialogue between the two leaders. Trump was accompanied by his wife, but no staff. And Putin had his translator present. It was just the 4 of them at a table. The U.S. State Department declined to discuss any details of the meeting, referring questions to the White House. A White House spokesman declined to comment beyond previous acknowledgments that a brief encounter occurred. New polling numbers are out, and they're not looking so good for President Bone Spurs.
Asked by Quinnipiac University, a poll on who do you trust more on the issues important to you? 49% say House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. 42% say President Trump. Among independent voters, trust in Pelosi is steady at 49, but trust in the president falls to 36. On the question of border security, voters trust Democrats in Congress more than President Trump, 50% to 41%. As for who is responsible for the government shutdown, 56% say Trump, and congressional Republicans, 34% blame the Democrats. And when asked whether a border wall with Mexico would significantly decrease violent crime, only 33% said yes, 64% said no.
Score one for Chuck Schumer. He announced that Stacey Abrams, who was barely defeated in November in Georgia's gubernatorial race, will deliver the Democratic response to the State of the Union address, now scheduled for Tuesday evening, February 5th. And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I really can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. The U.S. announced stiff financial sanctions against Venezuela's state oil firm this week, part of a pressure campaign aimed at dislodging President Nicolas Maduro and replacing him with interim President Juan Guaido. Those sanctions involve freezing $7 billion in U.S. assets belonging to Petróleos de Venezuela, or PDVSA, and could deny Venezuela up to $11 billion in lost revenue over the coming year. Targeting PDVSA is no accident. Leaders of the Venezuelan military hold major stakes in the firm and for now remain one of Maduro's staunchest backers.
The United States is trying to convince the military that there's no future with Maduro and that they should switch their support to Guaido.
Juan Carlos Hidalgo is a policy analyst for Latin America at the Cato Institute.
If PDVSA runs out of money, that means that the military is going to run out of the business they've been running for a couple of years, and that's going to make their life very difficult.
This is a bold and risky strategy.
Francisco Minaldi is a fellow in Latin American energy policy at Rice University's Baker Institute.
It is going to cause a significant hardship, first to the Venezuelan government, but also to the Venezuelan people that are already suffering from the worst depression in the recorded history of Latin America.
PDVSA is Venezuela's largest employer and primary revenue source, meaning the U.S. sanctions could worsen unemployment, an already dire cash crunch, and drive more Venezuelans to flee the country. Venezuela is now searching for someone to buy the 500,000 barrels of oil it typically sends to American refineries each day, but that's proving tricky since the country's notoriously heavy oil can't just be processed anywhere. And even if Venezuela finds a buyer like China, it's hardly out of the woods.
The question there is that the Chinese will allow the cash to go back to Venezuela, given that they are owed $17 billion, and every barrel of oil that goes there is used to pay off that debt.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this priest? Hey, before we get started into weather from around the world, I want to give a little program note. A week from today, being Wednesday, and that's next week, and I believe that's the 6th or 7th. Don't quote me. Well, I'll just tell you right now. Hold on here. It will be... Why, of course. It will be the 6th, of course. I will be driving to my father's 90th birthday, which will be happening the weekend of the 9th and 10th. But I'll be driving down starting on Wednesday, I believe. And that's when Netroots Radio will go on a modified schedule. You'll, of course, be able to hear Kagro in the morning. And you'll get Tom Hartman, and you'll get Malloy, and you'll get a few other things too. We're going to try to figure out how to get some of our content in timely. I will be unable to load the radio station from afar, but we'll have a radio station going 24/7, but it will be modified, so do bear with us. And I should be back full bore here doing this show, and making sure Netroots Radio has all the content that you have come to love on Tuesday. So that would be 11th, 12th. All right, so I'll fill you in more as we get closer to next week. All right, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world, and you know that. Okay, we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America. Because we're not actually around the world yet, we're going to start off here at the mothership where it is 32 degrees, and we are under a dense fog advisory. And at 32 degrees, you'd almost think that's freezing fog. Almost. Partly cloudy conditions, which will remain most of the day. Winds have shifted now out of the east-southeast, but remain light and variable. Should have a high of about 60 to 62. Overnight lows will be in the low to mid-50s. And that's the temperatures that we're going to have. Highs of 60 to 62, ostensibly, for the next few days. Though next week, when I leave, we're supposed to have some snow. I mean, well, there's going to be snow at elevation, but rain. And I have to drive through the Siskiyous and Shasta. Yeah, that's the Siskiyous. So fun. Visibility is at 7 miles. Barometric pressure is 29.76 inches and falling, and relative humidity is at 88%. Now, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted. These purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Well, London is 40 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 38 and cloudy. Rome is 47 and partly cloudy. Kiev is 38 with fog. Kabul is 24 with snow. Hong Kong, 64 degrees and fair. Tokyo, 39 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia, a quite balmy 75 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California, 52 degrees and mostly cloudy. Now they're saying that Manhattan right now is 24 degrees and sunny with a gale warning. That's pretty damn cold, but it ain't 50 degrees below. But with a gale warning, can you imagine the wind chill? Well, yeah. All right, looks like you'll have overnight lows about 5 degrees, which means it will be colder with the wind chill. So button up, hold on to your top hats, keep warm, and that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Well, of course, I missed Stephen Miller's immigration policy story in the Bistro Cafe, so we're going to pick it up here in the chef's table. That's right, back here in the kitchen, so sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Well, Rebecca Entrago brings us this story here at the chef's table. Details of the Trump's administration's Remain in Mexico policy, which was set to be implemented last Friday and requires asylum seekers to wait out their cases in Mexico, are beginning to make their way to the public already. Some are raising red flags. immigration attorneys and experts first sounded the alarm on Monday after U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services released a memo outlining the new process. Many believe the policy will add even more barriers to an already burdensome asylum system. Well, of course, that's a feature, not a bug. Now, of course, the only way to apply for asylum is to do it in the United States. You can't do it at the embassy or in the country you're fleeing. The legal authorities there are going to say, oh, yeah, go ahead. Here, let me fill out an application for you and give it to Donnie. I don't think that's going to happen. But now they're implementing a policy of remain in Mexico and apply there.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
National security expert at Share Blue Media, Carolyn Orr, brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Putin fired a warning shot at Trump this week, strategically dropping compromising information to remind Trump that he has saved all the receipts from their interactions and he is not afraid to use them. Citing a Russian government official, the Financial Times reported that Trump met with Putin at last year's G2 summit in Buenos Aires without a translator or anyone from his administration present during the exchange. But you know what? Vlad did. And they broadcast it on TV too. The revelation provides the most detailed account to date of Trump and Putin's interactions during the November summit, and the details don't line up with the White House's description of the event. While Trump and Putin had initially been scheduled to meet at the summit, Trump publicly canceled the meeting amid new revelations about his financial and business ties to Moscow. Trump cited Russia's increased aggression toward Ukraine as a reason for canceling the meeting just ahead of the annual summit. But the Kremlin pushed back on Trump's attempt to cancel the meeting, saying Putin would still have a brief, impromptu meeting with Trump at the summit. In response, a White House official told reporters traveling with Trump to the summit that there is no scheduled pull-aside between the two leaders because they're not going to publicize it being a scheduled meeting. It's impromptu. And although the White House acknowledged in a statement at the time that Trump and Putin had briefly exchanged words on the sidelines, the encounter was described as casual and unplanned, and just one of a number of informal conversations with world leaders because, they do little hand signals and they know how much the VIG is going to be, and a little blink of an eye means, get rid of the U.S. economy. The revelation that Trump was not forthcoming about his November meeting with Putin comes just weeks after the Washington Post reported that Trump had withheld details of his previous talks with Putin from top officials in his administration, including confiscating notes from an interpreter who was present during one of the meetings. Trump has said he has the right to meet in private with world leaders, but this latest disclosure proves why that is such a dangerous idea, especially when that world leader is Vladimir Putin. Well. It's not the P-tape, folks. It's not just the P-tape. And the P-tape is only part of the dossier anyway. Let's be clear. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. You know the Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We'll meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. And do stay tuned to Netroots Radio 24/7, 365 for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum.